there have been serious regrets where a story that ends well reframes everything that has preceded it. Mother who's struggling with bits of aphasia and having difficulty speaking looks at her daughter and says, "It stops here." And what she's talking about is the anger and the kind of neglect that has circled through their family because that mother had been either abused or raised by an unloving mother. And she says, she looked at her grandson and says, "It stops here."
We've taken our eye off the ball, but I think I want to frame that a little bit more optimistically, which is we have a solid foundation and we need to come back to it and remember why we're doing what we're doing.
But I do see that this doesn't have to go badly, that we can still recover the bright potential of the field.
In reality, I interviewed a young lady that contacted me from a PhD program, super young in her PhD, and kind of focused on death and dying. And I'm just sitting there going, that was not a thing when I came in 1995. And so these dreams are coming to fruition. What's hitting me is, what are our dreams? Or is it just to hold on to this thing?
First, you make the point that efforts must start with zero tolerance of fraudulent business and clinical practices that harm vulnerable patients. And I have mentioned your quote countless times. Collegiality stops at criminality.
Defeatism is self-fulfilling. If you think you're going to lose, you're going to lose. Healthiest response to dying that I know of is to live fully, to face illness and caregiving and dying and grieving together as friends and families with love, and to foster, joy in the midst of sadness.
And now, our host, Chris Comeaux.
Hello and welcome to TCNtalks. I'm excited today. I'm really excited. I know I'm always excited when I do these podcasts, but especially excited today. First off, happy holidays. This is an incredible time for our listeners, just a special time of the year. Hopefully have celebrated a beautiful Thanksgiving with your family and your friends, and now you're heading headlong into the holiday season of Hanukkah, Christmas, and New Year. It's kind of crazy. So, Cordt, welcome. It's our top news stories of the month, but a really different one we're going to do this time.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here, Chris.
Yeah. Did you have a good Thanksgiving with your family?
It was fantastic. You might remember Dr. Dave Levy from the Air Force Academy presented or worked with you on a couple of podcasts this year. Yep. We are now officially related. My son married his daughter. And so we had a great time with both of our families combined. How about you?
Actually, we have our oldest son now married. So I have a daughter-in-law who's a wonderful ER nurse. And so they all throw stuff at us and say, quit talking about healthcare. And I'm going to have two daughter-in-laws between January and May of next year. So all three of our boys will have been married. But we have now the future in-laws. And so our family is just growing exponentially. It's just a really sweet time. It's really cool. I feel like that great hair. I'm just feeling like, I'm the wise father sitting around the table, just sitting back, marveling and listening to the special conversations. Well, Cordt, you and I have, this has really been a fun year as we've done these top news stories of the month and seeing how you and I have evolved this. And so I've had my framework I've used probably even going back to Mark Cohen's days before you took over Hospice and Palliative Care today, but I've really got mine dialed in based upon these 8 challenges. And I love how this year you've been, I think since about summertime, have taken Dr. Byock's strategic framework and started organizing your articles. And so this has been fun this year to point out, hey, listeners, first off, Hospice and Palliative Care Today is an amazing resource where Joy and Cordt are scouring thousands of articles to make sure you know what's coming. You always share, here's Cordt's articles, and you actually then organize them based upon the framework. I then go into these 8 challenge areas and say, as a C-suite leader, this is what we hope you didn't miss. And this is kind of shows a foreshadowing for 2026, because as you and I have got this dialed in, you have a wonderful lead behind, which has the statistics. So the data that shows this is what people have looked at this month. And then I take my little document that organizes mine based upon those 8 challenge areas. And literally in 10 minutes, someone could go, man, I'm not keeping up with the Hospice Palliative Care Today. You first should. But if you don't, in 10 minutes, you could look at those articles or those documents, and they could be fairly up to speed, not as much as if you're reading it on a day-to-day basis. And so that's kind of how we've morphed this. And you had a really cool idea that next year we should maybe make the shows, we could keep leaving the leave behinds. Maybe we hit very quickly like the stuff that we want to make sure that you and I have seen over the month that are big, that we don't want folks to miss, but maybe theme the show around Dr. Byock's framework because it's so important to the future, which is going to get us where we're just going today, which is really meant to be a gift to hospice and palliative care leaders and hospice and palliative care staff. And so just a quick, you and I had a really cool thing we did last week. My categories have been these 8 challenge areas. We had a future council meeting where all these future councils, we took those 8 challenges and I think it was like 1,000 man and woman hours working on those challenges and reported out over the course of a day. That meeting was incredible. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, but it was a pretty incredible day.
It was incredible. The breakouts for each of the work groups, they did a fantastic job, and it really set the stage for strategic planning and thinking about the challenges and opportunities ahead for hospices and palliative care providers into the future. The one thing that really made me smile was when Andrea Hale, who was chairing the regulatory breakout group, started off and said, I'd like to start off by using Dr. Ira Byock's strategic framework for the discussion of the regulatory issues moving forward. And her whole presentation was hitting on first, avoid waste, fraud, and abuse, then the 4 pillars, which we're going to jump into here in a minute. But I was so pleased because it caught me by surprise. Like I wasn't expecting that. And I love when things are fresh and new and a little bit different.
So Dr. Byock is with us. So hopefully those who are watching already like, who's that third person here? So he's in the room and we're talking all around him and about him. So I'll say one final thing. We really want today's show to be a gift. Hospice and palliative care, leaders and staff, this work that you do is amazing. We walk on sacred ground. And I grew up reading Dr. Byock's book, Dying Well, The 4 Things That Matter Most, Best Care Possible. He's just one of these people that I held up as a luminary, someone who is shaping this ethos of what this field should be. We were in the early stages of making it that, almost casting the vision of what it should be, the tools and the skills and the competencies to make it better. And so I also think there's a young generation. My second son works in hospice now, and there's the nurse Hadleys, the nurse Julies that are on social media. And I fear a little bit they don't know Dr. Byock. So I want it today to be a bit of a gift to them. So, Cordt, would you do the honors of introducing him?
It would be my pleasure. Dr. Ira Byock is a nationally recognized palliative care physician, author, and advocate for improving the experience of serious illness and end-of-life care in the United States. A pioneer in the hospice and palliative care movement for more than 4 decades, he served as a clinician, researcher, and organizational leader committed to advancing whole-person care. He's the founding director and chief medical officer of the Institute for Human Caring at Providence, where he led system-wide initiatives to integrate palliative principles across clinical settings. Previously, Dr. Byock served as president of the American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine, directed palliative care programs at the Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center, and contributed foundational research and frameworks that have shaped the field. Widely known for the books that you mentioned, Chris, Dying Well, The 4 Things That Matter Most, and The Best Care Possible, Dr. Byock brings a compassionate, humanistic voice to national conversations on quality, dignity, and meaning at the end of life. His work continues to inspire clinicians, leaders, and health systems to elevate care for patients and families facing serious illness. And I'll just mention on a personal note, 15 plus years ago, I was CEO of the Colorado Hospice Organization, the state organization in Colorado. And at that time, Ira and his wife, Yvonne, were at Dartmouth, and Yvonne was the state director for New Hampshire. And so I got to know Yvonne, who is absolutely an amazing individual and palliative care specialist in her own right. And it was through her that Ira, I think we met at at a table at a conference one day during lunch somewhere, and it's just been a pleasure to get to know you and appreciate your passion for the field. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Man, it's hard to listen to that. Thank you. I do want to correct, I am no longer with the Institute for Human Caring. I am still the founder. I'm on an advisory board, but I am officially jobless by choice, which is, a much better, well, it's actually more accurate than saying retired, because I don't feel exactly retired, but I have the pleasure of not having a day job. And so Dr. Matt Gonzalez is the head of the Institute for Human Caring, which continues within the Providence Health System. Both of you, thanks very much for having me. This is going to be fun.
You have the floor, sir.
Well, okay, I'll start again with my introduction. I'm all of that stuff, but here we are in the holiday season, and I am very, very aware that I am a father of two remarkable women, Leela Byock and Satya Doyle Byock. I am a grandfather of two remarkable young boys, Philo and Winslow. I am the husband of Yvonne Corbet. I'm, brother to my sister Molly, and all of that is very much who I identify as. And then I do this work as not just a profession, but as a passion. And that all informs what I do. So I am here today with all of that identity within me. You said this was a gift to hospice, and I just want to say, my continued experience is that hospice is a gift to us all, not just those of us who work in this field. It sure is a gift to us, but it is a gift to our communities. It is a gift to the patients and families we serve. And it really is a gift to Western healthcare. Western healthcare is so problem-based. It is so constricted by having to focus on the problems that bring you to doctors. We create problem lists. We soap our notes under every problem on the chart of a patient. And unfortunately, we have to justify what we do by determining that it's medically necessary. Hospice does all of that, and I think does it well. And it recenters human caring within the personal lives of the individual patients we serve, their families, not just their blood relatives, but those who they identify as part of their families, and rippling out to the communities that people live in. And that's not a small thing. Hospice, I truly believe that hospice, and which, of course, gave rise to palliative care, which is the larger field within which now hospice is the specialty delivery model for people who acknowledge that they are dying, frankly, and mostly who are centered or want to be centered at home or out of an acute care setting. But hospice is really and truly one of the most dramatic developments of healthcare in the latter part of the 20th century. And it doesn't have the sizzle, of genomics or transplantation or, all of the high technical, remarkable stuff that, frankly, I love and that, we rightly honor. But it genuinely transformed the way people who have advanced incurable illness experience not only healthcare, but their lives. And that's not a small thing, but it doesn't get acknowledged hardly at all. And for the listeners of TCNtalks and this podcast, I think it's important just to pause and acknowledge that what we're involved in doing is truly a transformative development in human caring. And what we have tended to neglect, I guess, is that in trying to grow up and be like, the internal medicine fields, the cardiologists and the oncologists, and be respected in the halls of medicine, we tend to sort of have sheared off that stuff that is built on the base of excellent medical care, the problem-based model and the diagnostics and therapeutics, but we stop there. And this gets to the fourth, what you're calling the fourth pillar, the fourth component of that strategy that I've elaborated, which is that what distinguishes hospice and palliative care from the very best of good medical care, skillful communication, shared decision making, excellent symptom management, is that we deliberately foster well-being for the people we serve. I honestly think we don't see it or talk about it because there's not a billing code for it. And if not a billing code, it's not medically necessary. Well, how do we track it? But I'm not being, this is not platitude. It is describing what the clinicians and the hospice teams do in caring for seriously ill people and their families. We do it so naturally that it doesn't seem like, that's just what we do, right? We plan for the weddings or we hold weddings at home for somebody who's not going to survive to see the wedding that was planned 3 months from now in a garden somewhere. Well, that's not going to happen. So we're going to get married today, Dad. And we want you to be part of it. I've seen this dozens of times and we just say, yeah, wow, that was really cool. And then we move on. We help people attend, a child's birth or first birthday or their confirmation or their bar mitzvah or their quinceañera or their school play. Or we get them to zoom into the bar mitzvah, that's happening 1,000 miles away. We at least in the programs that I have been part of, we not only talk about the active problems that a patient has at each weekly or biweekly IDT, but when I'm in the medical director of a program, we pause and say, are there opportunities here? Is the patient comfortable enough now to talk about what might be left undone if she isn't able to get to that event, or might she want to see a sister who I understand she hasn't been in touch with in years, or if a guy has been previously married and for 20 years, but it ended in a bitter divorce, would he want to reach out? And if so, could we help him? Could we maybe help him craft a letter? Could somebody, either our social worker or maybe a trained volunteer sit with him and just listen, take some notes, and then maybe craft a letter for him with him, co-creating it so that he might send that letter to just be in touch with. As I have to say, guys, as I'm talking about this, I could stop and tell a dozen stories, right? Because these aren't abstract. This is stuff that happens. What other discipline does this? I don't know of an oncology team, as excellent as they are, and I'm pro oncologists, right? Who, in addition to making sure that the person has an advanced care plan, advanced directive, is comfortable, needs are met. Who else talks about life completion, right? Who else takes the time to invest energies in helping somebody celebrate life and relationships, have a farewell party. You know, I could keep going, but this is a distinguishing feature of our field. And we really ought not forget that we do this too, and that it has value, not just for the medical system, but for the persons, the families, and the communities that we are part of and that we serve. I was part of the field in the United States at its beginning, no question. And we were very concerned about, being a mature, respected medical discipline. We may have visited about this before, but we literally sat around a campfire early on in Rocky Mountain National Park at one of the lodges in Estes, and talked about the future. And after days of committee meetings and doing our work, we'd sit and have a beer or a glass of wine and talk about, well, wouldn't it be cool if someday there were textbooks about hospice and care of people who are incurable? And wouldn't it be cool if there were courses in medical school? And oh my God, could you imagine someday that there was a specialty? Oh man, and this was dreaming big, right? I worry that in doing this, we positioned ourselves as a death and dying movement. And I think that's come back to haunt us, and we couldn't have known, no fault, but I honestly think we were the completion of the well-being movement. That was also an active cultural theme in the late 20th century and now the first part of the 21st century. I think, how do we do this? We're going to get to that probably in this conversation. Part of what we need to do is really work with our public relations people who we still pay, and to start repositioning ourselves as those who can help you complete life. A life well lived, or a life in which there have been serious regrets, where a story that ends well reframes everything that has preceded it. A story of a fractured relationship that ends well, with reconciliation and offers of forgiveness and expressions of forgiveness and attestations of love and affection. All of that changes a person's story, the story of a relationship. It all becomes a prelude to a better ending. And it frankly restories families. You mentioned I've written books, and in every one of those books, which are story-driven books, they're real stories. There's at least one story in which, I'm thinking of one from the Four Things That Matter Most, in which there was bitterness between an elderly, now dying mother and her daughter, and in a very poignant encounter with the daughter and her now dying mother, and the daughter's, I think, young son was with them. Mother, who's struggling with bits of aphasia and having difficulty speaking, looks at her daughter and says, "It stops here." And what she's talking about is the anger and the kind of neglect that has circled through their family, because that mother had been either abused or raised by an unloving mother. And she says, she looked at her grandson and says, "It stops here." This is not simple stuff, and it's not trivial. And I say, we who are able to do this for families are a gift to modern healthcare and to our patients, families, and communities. Let's not forget that as we deal with the serious problems that we need to deal with.
Wow. I should have said this, but I did say it in the green room. I want to say it now. I envision this show as us sitting around the Thanksgiving table with the hospice field. It would obviously be a very big table these days. And then hearing Ira, Dr. Byock hold forth. There's so many poignant things in what you just said. The first thing I just want to call out, and I want to hand it to Cordt, because we do want to use this intro that you just did, to me, is a perfect segue in talking about your strategic framework. But something that occurred to me was actually I know you're a person of faith, we're all different faiths, you and I and Cordt, but people of faith, about childlike faith, like returning to that childlike belief. I feel like you called us back to that mission, which, I didn't ask you directly to do that, but that's so awesome. One of my favorite quotes in the entire world is a T.S. Eliot quote, that you arrive where you first began, but you know that place for the first time.
Lovely.
That feels like we need a dose of that right now in this beautiful field that we have. When I worked for Studer Group, Dr. Byock, for a time, I was shadowing all these Studer coaches in these acute care facilities, and many of these facilities were measuring 700, 800 things. And in the early days of Studer Group, what they were well known for is just calling people back to purpose. You may go, that's not brilliant, that's not technical AI or some really cool technology, but you just saw people come alive because they were calling them back to the purpose. I feel like that's what you're doing, and I think that's a perfect segue to this paper. So, Cordt, do you want to take it from there?
I was kind of reflecting on similar themes. Last month, Chris, you did a masterclass on back to basics, whether that's the football field and repeating drills until you get it right. And I kept thinking of that analogy, Ira, as you were talking about where hospice and palliative care began and how we need to return to those drills and be excited about, life completion, not the death and dying movement. And how it is so incredibly important that we get this right. And I think perhaps in the growth of the field to, multi-billion-dollar kind of impact nationally, internationally, maybe I was going to say we've taken our eye off the ball, but I think I want to frame that a little bit more optimistically, which is we have a solid foundation and we need to come back to it and remember why we're doing what we're doing.
And maybe I was going to say one more thing, and you could take it, Dr. Byock. It just occurred to me listening to Cordt, that story you just told by the bedside and how these potential redemptions occur at the end. Like you could almost redeem your story at the end, that when we facilitate that, maybe that's what you're doing with this paper in some respects, that we have this opportunity to still redeem the story as a movement and as a field.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I maybe so. We're built on so much success, and it is threatened. But this field began to show that better care is possible when somebody is seriously ill and dying. We realized that we're going to have to show that in doing so, we didn't add costs to a bloated, unrealistically expensive healthcare system. Along the way, scroll forward 30 plus years, we have now in the literature demonstrated not just that better care is possible, we have demonstrated that much better care is possible, and that it is utterly affordable, that it is actually diminishes costs when compared to care in its absence. That is a consistent finding. Both of those are consistent findings. So we have succeeded brilliantly, frankly, and yet, frankly, the bright potential of the field continues to be threatened and, frankly, eroded, and that hurts my heart. And I wrote this, maybe to kind of be able to redeem the field, but really I wrote it out of self-care, which is mostly why I wrote those books. If I didn't express myself and express what I was able to see and understand, I was gonna, I was really going to have to go on the couch and talk to somebody for a long period of time, and the writing may be more painful, frankly, at least in my hands. But I do see that this doesn't have to go badly. That we can still recover the bright potential of the field, which exists in a number of places. Don't get me wrong, but as I scan across the country, and I'm just public enough that people write me all the time and call me and ask for things, so I have a sense of what's going on in the country. I know we have work to do, and there's reason to be concerned about the health of the field of hospice and palliative care.
Thank you to our TCNtalks sponsor, Dragonfly Health. Dragonfly Health is also the title sponsor for Leadership Immersion courses. Dragonfly Health is a leading care-at-home data, technology, and service platform. With a 20-year history, Dragonfly Health uses advanced technology and robust analytics to manage durable medical equipment and pharmaceutical services as part of a single efficient solution for caregivers, patients, and their families. The company serves millions of patients annually across all 50 states. Thank you, Dragonfly Health, for all the great work that you do.
But one of the things you said that just struck me, and it's so cool, I think my family was at that same resort in Estes Park. Maybe I'll check with that when we're done, but I'm picturing you guys sitting around the fire and dreaming about those things that are now reality. I interviewed a young lady that contacted me from a PhD program, super young in her PhD, and kind of focus on death and dying. And I'm just sitting there going, that was not a thing when I came in 1995. And so these dreams are coming to fruition. What's hitting me is, what are our dreams? Or is it just to hold on to this thing? You guys were dreaming big, and are we dreaming too small right now for where the field goes? Which again, I feel like is your part behind the strategic framework. So, Cordt, do you want to take it from there and maybe start with your first question?
Sure. I'll set the stage for listeners just to cover the ground, right? We're talking about Ira's paper, A Strategic Path Forward for Hospice and Palliative Care, a white paper on the potential future of the field. And to take this amazing work that you've done and sum it up quickly so that we can talk about the reaction and the development and the implementation of this, I'll just highlight a couple of points. First, you make the point that efforts must start with zero tolerance of fraudulent business and clinical practices that harm vulnerable patients. And I have mentioned your quote countless times: collegiality stops at criminality. And then you go on to describe 4 components of this strategic approach. The first being publishing clear clinical and programmatic standards. The second, making meaningful data readily available. The third, driving quality-based competition. And fourth, embracing the field's authentic brand of expert care that fosters well-being for patients and families. And I think really my first question is, in light of all of this, what feedback have you received for the paper, positive or critical? And has any of this made you rethink or refine parts of the strategy? I'll close with this, that I'm a firm believer, based on too many experiences of trying to do things with the right intent and doing them well, that no good deed goes unpunished. And sometimes the feedback that I have gotten for different ventures has just surprised me. And it makes me take a step back and pause and reflect and kind of think about it maybe in a different way. What kind of feedback have you had for this?
Well, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. I've gotten a lot of, heartfelt thanks from colleagues. I should mention, I looked early this morning in preparation for our conversation, and as of today, there have been 10,202 downloads of the paper, which is, for our field, pretty remarkable, and it grows every day by somewhere between 10 and 30 new downloads, which is heartening. There's a sense that this is still very active and being discussed, thanks to things like TCNtalks. Did a Jerry Powell podcast that was very well received. So that's really wonderful. I took to heart the letter to the editor by Karen Bullock and Kathy Johnson and others about the need for emphasis on equity, and I've been sitting with that. I reached back out to them immediately to say thank you for that, and let's talk and let's be creative about how that would work. And I haven't yet had any meetings with them, but I'm interested in it. I do think, just on the equity issue, which I did acknowledge that I didn't, I hadn't forgotten about, but set aside in white paper, the strategic path forward paper, that my thinking about it is, everybody needs to get on the bus, and this bus should be a way to transport everybody to better care and healthy completion of their life within the context of family and community. But the bus has serious problems. It's leaking oil, it's rattling, the steering is out of alignment, and we could go off the road. And so it's what I tried to do using that analogy is to fix the bus so that it can contain all of us. And I still think that for me, that's where I can be of most value to caring for everyone. People of color, different people who speak non-English languages, people who live in rural areas, children who are often don't have access to this sort of high-quality palliative and hospice care that we think about. All of that. Rethink is maybe not the right word, Cordt, but I think I would be eager to work with others, or just to support others in doing it themselves, in expanding this framework so that it can, reach that quintuple aim.
I didn't know you were going to say this, so actually maybe I'll go second. First off, I loved Karen's question, actually, because it got me thinking, and I have a suggestion maybe for you to keep processing, maybe how to expand the framework. But on page 311, you did, when you were laying out the symptoms of our field, that was the last point that you made about, we're still woefully not reaching many populations when you look at the statistics. So you did call it out in your paper, while it didn't get a whole subtext to that. So here's my question to you, Ira, is that I don't know if you guys had a framework when you're sitting around the fire, maybe like holistic care and things like that. But if we have a framework going forward, I 100% think it's your strategic framework, plus maybe two additional things. The quintuple aim. My read of what Dr. Berwick was after was original triple aim, got added a fourth and now a fifth, was grown up to the quintuple aim. But basically better care, better service, lower cost, better work environment for employees, and then health equity, reaching everybody possible that you need to. If you took, and what I'm picturing is a Venn diagram, almost like what Jim Collins did years ago. What are you passionate about? What can you be the best of the world at? What drives your economic engine? So your framework, the quintuple aim, and then what I'm wondering is the third part of that little Venn diagram is the 4 M's. And we've done a lot of podcasts around that. What matters most: mentation, mobility, and medication. Those three together may be a really great canvas that if we then paint and dream big like you guys did going forward. So I don't know if I didn't prepare you that I was going to say that. So.
Well, I love it. I do love it. And I wish we had a whiteboard here and we could start, mocking it up. I think best with whiteboards and in rooms and.
We'll have to get you down to TCN HQ. We just got 2 whiteboards here in our headquarters. So you need to come down to the Asheville North Carolina area, and we'll get you on the whiteboard, and Cordt will have to come visit, and we'll do that.
I would enjoy that, really, really. But yeah, I love the idea. I don't think this is done. I hope the field is still young enough to keep evolving. We should be dreaming big, and we should be thinking about, the future and how, there's so much wonderful advances in healthcare that we need to somehow absorb and incorporate. People are living longer for things that we thought they were dying of, and that's a good thing. My God, it's a fabulous thing. So, what do we do about that? And how do we we mentioned the challenges of demographics and language and age and all of that. We need to think about, how do we care well for people with dementia, which I know is a strong interest of all of ours. But Chris, you've done some remarkable podcasts on this, and I have my own thoughts about that. But this needs us. When people think about dementia and advances in dementia, they think about new drugs that are going to, unwrap our neurons, and I hope, please do, right? But in the meantime, what does well-being look like in an individual affected with dementia, in a family who's living with somebody who's affected with dementia? Who else can address those questions better than we and our colleagues?
The piece that I really appreciate about your framework is the simplicity and the broadness of it, the inclusivity of it, and by that, what I'm really thinking about here is that there are many frameworks. You've outlined one. Chris and Telios have outlined another with 8 to 10 points of things to be looking for in the future. The OIG has outlined a waste, fraud, and abuse framework of how they're going to approach hospice and what that looks like. There are frameworks for healthcare for the United States, for world, single payer systems. There's pediatrics, and Chris, started rolling off some of the subgroups: pediatrics, minorities, prison, medical aid and dying, use of marijuana and end of life care. There's like this shotgun approach of all of these different things, and of course, where my thinking started with this, and I didn't include it in my list, what were the equity issues, the diversity issues, the minority populations, and how research has demonstrated over and over substandard care for particular groups of people, that we need to kind of right that ship. And as I look at your 4 principles, this is not an either or. It's not like, well, Ira's right and the OIG is wrong. It's and. Like, well, how do we take those equity principles? How do we take pediatrics and rural and waste, fraud, and abuse and incorporate it into? And that's what I love about your framework, is that it is broad enough to have a place for all of those sub issues, if you will, that fall under well-being at the end of life, while being simple enough that somebody like me can understand it. And for that, I really appreciate that, because I read a lot of frameworks and things that I just kind of look at and go, wow, I feel like I should understand this, but I just don't, is the bottom line. And that was not my experience in reading your paper and talking with people around the country with it. I have also had similar positive feedback that, this is a really helpful construct to think about hospice and palliative care for the next 5, 10, 20 years. And I think from a maturity perspective, we kind of need that. We need that kind of framework to think about where we've come from, where we're at today, where we're going tomorrow, and you've outlined that. I'd like to ask you
Well,
about
can I respond? I think
Sure.
straightforward is not easy. It is
Yeah.
straightforward. It's simple because it's pretty. I tried to be fundamental in constructing this. So it's I mean, it's not fancy or complex, but that doesn't mean it's easy to implement. And I think let me just amplify what I said about the barriers, and then I'll let you continue. Sorry, Cordt. The barriers are, people think, oh, I've been told, Ira, this is painfully ambitious. That's a quote. Or Ira, you don't understand. The corporations have all the power. You're not going to. Or Ira, we're never going to get there. I mean, this is very nice, but and so the barriers are, firstly, a sense of defeatism. I hear that from colleagues, not uncommonly, and I would just point out that defeatism is self-fulfilling. If you think you're going to lose, you're going to lose. I promise you. I hear fed back to me that Ira, you have to stop beating on the for-profit corporations. And I just wait a minute. I think I'm the only one who keeps saying we have to stop framing this as for-profit versus nonprofit. I think that's absolutely the misframing of this that's causing us to be paralyzed. I keep saying that, and it keeps coming back to me as if I've said something that I haven't said. It should not matter. This framework that I've put forward makes it irrelevant who owns the program and what their tax status is. What's relevant is the care demonstrably good enough so that I can refer patients confidently, so that the care is good enough for to take care of somebody's mother or father or spouse or child. We have to stop beating up on the for-profits as if they're the problem and that the non-for-profits are the solution. I honestly do not believe that's the case. And can we just get beyond that and start focusing on quality and start redirecting component 3, competition, to be based on quality. And therefore, if you can succeed by consistently demonstrating better outcomes, better staff experience, quadruple aim, better economics, then we're going to refer patients to you. We're going to contract with you for our health plan's book of business. Let's do that. And while the corporations indeed have much more power than the three of us, we still have the ability to shift competition progressively toward quality and away from the sort of quiet deal making that is obscure and that frankly does not serve patients and families.
That's well said. I was going to make a comment if you wanted to still ask your question in a second, Cordt, that we did a podcast on with Laura Katz-Olson. She wrote a book called Ethically Challenged, and she really called out a lot of the private equity stuff. My ending to that whole show was, private equity does some good in this country, but here's the point. I don't care what business you're in and how it's funded. If you're not about creating a better product for your customer, like usually I do training all the time, and I'll ask people, give me an example of your worst, just most frustrating customer service experience. Invariably, it's some type of internet, typically because they have a monopoly and there's not good quality and there's not good service. And so that profiteering that's occurred is people that are trying to treat hospice as a vending machine, a cash vending machine to feed some economic model. That's created a lot of ills. Tax status aside, if a nonprofit was all about maximizing the dollar and lost sight of the mission, where we started this conversation, that's not good. And so I love that I even owned up in our podcast together because I get a lot of criticism. You're always down on the for-profits, probably more than you, Dr. Byock, because I work with a lot of nonprofits. That's what TCN is about. But I owned it on the air with you is that, hey, I totally agree with what you're saying, because if we agree to this framework and we're all working for the betterment towards those quintuple aims and using your framework, the patients and families are going to win. Tech status aside, good competition. You're not rigging the game. You're not doing some of the unethical stuff, the criminality ends in collegiality. So again, I wanted to kind of own, I get a lot of criticism in that, and I kind of backed it up. And I heard what I heard you say the first time is, hey, there's so much need and it's going to be worse with the baby boomers. Nonprofits can't step in and fill all that void, although I'd like to say, hey, give us a shot. But the for-profits that are doing it right, that ecosystem together based upon your framework, if we do that, patients and families will win.
You know, I just want to tell you one surprisingly positive thing that's happened, and that is, I couldn't have anticipated this. I've had 2 different large health plans contact me and ask me to consult with them around the framework and around the their need to assess hospice programs that want to be in their network and have confidence that in bringing hospices into their network, they are well serving their members. And this is remarkable. One of them is a very large health plan that serves Medi-Cal patients. They're both in California, which is awash with fraud and abuse. I mean, California has 2,500 of the nation's 6,800 programs. It's crazy, right? It's just absolutely, it's the Wild West. Despite their moratorium and despite everything that the Attorney General is trying to do, they don't have the resources to control this. So, but the health plans have a lot of suasion, and they have the ability to set their own, frankly, proprietary filters for which programs they include in network. And so I'm working with 2 of them to tighten up those criteria for bringing programs in network in a way that is well motivated, trying to make sure that we are safeguarding the health plan's members and providing the best care we possibly can, with metrics backing up metrics on quality and health resource use. I didn't anticipate that, and I think that gives me a real sense of hope that maybe this will have some legs.
I think so. I think that's a great kind of thumbs up.
It gives that opportunity to implement, that it's not just theory, but like, how do we actually do this? Which is really where I want to head with. I have lots of questions. I keep thinking of the Thanksgiving table and, hey, everybody come out to Colorado and let's just sit around for about a week and figure this out. That would be so much fun. Where my question is going, then I'll explain why I'm asking it, is what's your first step, Ira? Where does this begin? And I'm asking that in the context of thinking about publishing clear clinical programmatic standards. Like, which organizations are supposed to do that? How do we do that? Is this an update? Is this a full redesign? Making data available. What data? Existing measures, new measures. How do you measure well-being? What does that look like? Driving quality-based competition. You know, the cultural and organizational changes needed to be made based on quality versus profits or market share. As you kind of wrapped up the 4th principle around the brand, the authentic brand around well-being for patients and their families, so many questions on how to actually do that. And so I'll go back to my original question, which is, where's that starting place for you?
Well, I think we've started. I think for me, this has been a journey that didn't start with the publication. It started probably 3 years before with ruminations and then 2 years, probably, I say a year and a half, but it's probably 2 years of trying to write this stuff and trying to figure it out for myself in a way that seems simple, as you said, or straightforward, I would say. I think we've started. I think when I look at who could do this, I frankly look at the coalition, Coalition for Coalition for hospice and palliative care that Jennifer Hauser directs, and particularly the professional associations within that coalition. I would look at the Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine, the Hospice and Palliative Nurses Association, the Social Work Network, Hospice and Palliative Care Network, the Chaplaincy Network. I would put CAPC in that line of professional. I would love to say that NPHI and the Alliance should be part of that. But I have to say that neither of those two groups have been willing to engage with me, at least, in talking about this. And I wish they would. I think it's that perception somehow that I'm trying to pit nonprofits against for-profits or something. Which is not the case at all. It's completely wrong. But I would start there. I think a state association could do this. I would love to see. I would love to see the Coalition for Compassionate Care in California elaborate draft standards and then begin to implement those in terms of publishing and pushing them out to their members and to the discharge planners, the physician groups, the hospitals, and the health plans in California. Use these as filters when you're choosing hospice programs. We need to push out the fact that hospitals can have preferred provider lists of hospice programs, and then create draft standards for those preferred provider lists. It won't be. It's going to be iterative. We'll never get. There's not a one and done. Same for measures. Where would I look? Yes, we have to build on the measures that exist. I mean, I look at a Medicare Compare and the hospice locator that Hospice Analytics nicely publishes and maintains. That's a place to start. Yeah, I want other measures. I want measures like frequency of visits by each of the disciplines, the major disciplines at least. The nurses, I think doctors and the diminishing role of doctors is important. So data on its structure, process, outcome. Do you have doctors on staff? How many doctors per patient do you have on staff? How often do they see patients? And then I would add responses to emergencies. How do you respond to symptomatic crises when they occur, particularly in patients' homes? I want to see, thinking about that quadruple aim, I want to see on data sets staff satisfaction and annual staff turnover rates by discipline. I know in the questions that you had drafted and nicely sent to me, there is, well, how are you going to get these data? Well, for one thing, I notice, by the way, I haven't talked about government virtually at all here, because I think one of the things that our field tends to do, or the associations tend to do, is they think all policy has to do with what you ask Congress or CMS to do. I think there's so much more that we could do internally without even worrying about the government, but it would also resource the government to do its job better. But I think, if you're going to receive Medicare and Medicaid dollars, we have a right to ask for the transparency in data, including staff satisfaction and staff turnover data. You can't hold that data and take our money. So give us the data. We're just going to be transparent about the data, right? And that's part of shifting competition toward quality, right? I could go on and on, and I know we should have Jamie Boudreau on, who a guy who I love and who has been asking about, well, what's the feasibility of this? Well, I think Jamie could do this in Louisiana, frankly, and he just needs a little coaching.
I grew up like Thibodeau Boudreau jokes are a thing. Like you got Comeaux and Boudreau. I'm thinking that's a whole show right there. Well, I wanted to land the plane in this last question. I want to give you then the final word, Dr. Byock. And so the embracing and promoting our authentic brand. I love what you said in kind of the opening monologue about we have been successful. I don't think there's any way we could have anticipated that we would have become synonymous with death and hospice. And now people hear that word. And it's one reason why our media let this stay. is so low. I usually say that everybody wants to go to heaven, nobody wants to die. It's that human, we want to survive. And I think that we're going to have to use different words. That's actually a little bit of my theory about the 4 M's. I think the 4 M's is a framework to talk about what we do without bringing up the H word. I'm not trying to tap dance around that I love what you said, that we foster well-being at the end of this journey. I like that framing. So can you speak about that a little bit? Because it feels like there's a lot of work that needs to be done here, especially with the baby boomers. There's all these cool commercials. We just showed a weather tech the other day at the training that Cordt and I were at with these future councils with these wonderful old ladies that are like in the convertible and they're just like living it up. And that's like that vision of what retirement is like. But the storm cloud is the serious advanced illness that comes. And we're part of the solution to help them do that final chapter well, kind of still living that ethos of like this, the spirit of freedom that has defined the baby boomers throughout these different decades.
I am a firm believer that dying sucks, right? But it is a fact of human life, and the healthiest response to dying that I know of is to live fully, to face illness and caregiving and dying and grieving together as friends and families with love, and to foster, joy in the midst of sadness, embracing even the sadness, because it sucks. And I say this having 3 or 4 good friends who are, I'm about to turn 75. In my life, there is a constantly I have close friends and relatives who are seriously ill and likely to die within not too many months. Embracing the sadness, but the healthy response is loving in defiance of mortality, and to honoring and celebrating life and relationships. As a Jewish guy, the toast, the most famous Jewish toast is to life, right? I sign all of my books to life, because that's what this is about, to honor and celebrate the miracle and gift of life. I think that hospice is the completion of the continuum of human caring. And it is I'm going to end where we started, but it is a gift to us all. I want to say thank you to your listeners, thank you to the field for all that you do day in and day out. And thanks, guys, for having me back.
This is awesome. Well, that's almost a perfect final word, but any other final thoughts you want to leave us with, Ira?
I'm done. Happy holidays.
The happy holidays is beautiful. I would have thought you were 60, by the way. So you're my hero in many ways, even in how you're doing aging well and you're still at it. So, Cordt, any final thoughts from your side?
No, well said.
Yeah. Happy holidays to our listeners. To our listeners, we really do appreciate you. This really was meant to be a gift, and I hope you will treat it as such. Pay it forward to your friends, your coworkers in this amazing field of hospice and palliative care. Hit the subscribe button. We don't want you to miss any future podcasts. And Cordt and I are going to use Dr. Byock's framework going forward into the top news stories of the month next year. We'll do the first one of the year where we do our predictions of things that are going to happen, kind of set the table. And then we're going to use that framework each month going forward next year. So this really was a foreshadowing. Plus, anytime we get to sit down with Dr. Byock is just truly a gift. Happy holidays to your family, Dr. Byock. Cordt, to you and your family as well. And to our listeners also. And I want to leave you with 2 quotes today. This is really cool. One of our CEOs that we work with in the network took a picture in front of their orientation manuals, and she said, I totally forgot this was in there. It was this quote: "When the human dimension of dying is nurtured, for many, the transition from life can become as profound, intimate, and precious as a miracle of birth." Of course, that's Dr. Ira Byock in Dying Well. And then this last one: "Gratitude can transform common days into Thanksgivings, turn routine jobs into joy, and change ordinary opportunities into blessings." That's by William Arthur Ford. Thanks for listening to TCN Talks.